What's going on, civil designers? So I take it you're here because you want to learn how to do some dynamic commercial grading. And that's what I'm going to be here to show you. So let me start off by explaining the concept of it. I think a lot of times it gets kind of lost in translation on what exactly I'm doing. Long story short, whenever we design commercial or industrial projects, right, we'll have, let's say this line is our flow line. And then to get our top of curb, back of curb, let's say we want to run quantities. So we want a datum surface. All that stuff gets super hairy when you're trying to make it dynamic, check your quantities. And so this process I came up with is kind of using an outside of the box solution, something that just came to me one day and I've been using it ever since. Been about 4 or 5 years now. And this is how I'm going to explain it. So we have a couple of assemblies here. And what this sub-assembly is, just for this purpose, I'm going to use that urban curb and gutter debacle that is out of the box from Civil 3D. So what we're going to have here, the best way to explain it is here at my flow line. So if I zoom out, my flow line here, where this starts, is going to be my feature line that I'm going to use over here. So these two are interconnected, right? So what I'm going to get out of this is whenever I make a change to my flow line, my top of curb, my back of curb, my datum, they're all going to stay relative to this flow line. If I have sidewalk, right? So maybe this sidewalk comes up to the front of the building. I know I want my sidewalk to be 2%. So here I'm going to be generating off of this one flow line, 1, 2, 3 dynamic points, and then 4 with the datum, if that makes sense. So how do I do it? So you can just go through, maybe create a feature line at a 0 elevation and then start throwing elevations on this guy. What I like to do for simplicity's sake is as you create feature lines, obviously you're going to have a bunch of data. A lot of times you're not going to want a point somewhere and let's say this here is a walkway up to the building. And when you add this point here, it's going to add a point to your feature line and it's going to have to register all that. So what I normally like to do is I'll do a polyline first. Anywhere that I want one of those points, I'll just come in here and add a vertex. And that way I have all the points I think I'm going to want on my feature line, but they're not going to be nearly as hard to add or edit before I create the feature line, if that makes sense. So like in this case here, we have this radius. It looks like my low point wants to be right about here. So I'm probably going to want a vertex there. So I'm going to go ahead and put a vertex right there. And because this is a polyline, not a feature line, I can just go ahead and make these real quick edits before I was to have done that with the feature line, and it gets all screwy and you got to change a whole bunch of other settings. So this is just the way I do it. Again, I make these videos mainly to teach you guys how to think outside the box a little bit and give you some ideas. So now let's go ahead and start throwing this guy together and we'll see how fast it comes together. So first I'm going to come up to the Home tab, go to my feature line, and we're going to create feature lines from objects. So let's go ahead and do this big one first. I'm going to go ahead and accept that. I typically like to name these. So I'm going to go ahead and go with flow line. And I'm going to go ahead and use my basic style. And we're going to go ahead and erase the entity. We do not want to assign elevations yet. We don't want to weed points. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And typically this feature line, next thing we need to take into account is the direction this feature line is going. Typically the feature line will follow the direction in which you drew the polyline. So in this case, I started here on this corner, drew it going around to there. And so the reason you want to take into account the direction of your feature line is because of the side that you need your curb to be on. So by us starting here in this corner and going in this direction, my curb is going to be on the left side like I want it. And then just to double check, we can go ahead and grab the feature line. I usually come up to the elevation editor. It's going to bring up the panorama, scroll all the way to the top. And when I hit 0, I should be with this green triangle where I want to start. And just to double check, yes, we're going in the right direction. Now, if for some reason I wasn't going the right direction, you can simply hit this button here to reverse the direction. So now that I know this guy's good, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this feature line and let's go ahead and add some elevations. So obviously we need to tie into existing ground here. So when I go ahead and select that, I want to go ahead and hit S so I can grab a surface elevation, and we want to grab our existing ground, right? This needs to tie into the existing road. So we're going to go ahead and keep that elevation, and then here, all the way on the other end, we're going to want to do the same thing. So I'm going to hit S for surface. We're going to pull our existing ground. And so we're at 807 on that side. We're at 818. So we got 10 feet of fall through here. So more than likely, this building is going to be a little up in the air. And then we're going to have to probably dive down here, see what we're at this spot, set our building elevation. This guy's going to want to be flat, and then we're going to dive back down and see if we can hit existing ground. So the next tool I'm going to use, I use this tool a lot, is to set a grade between points. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here at our existing ground. And let's say for design purposes, I want to come to this spot right here. And I know that I don't want to exceed a grade of -5%. And then everything typically needs to go away from the building. So then we're going to go ahead and go up at 2%. And now we're at 813.5. And let's go ahead and from there, we're going to have to maintain that 813.5 all the way around to there. And so we will go ahead and do a grade of 0. And then now what we want to do is we're going to come down at 2% here. And that's going to set that at 813.2. And let's go ahead and now we're going to set a grade between 2 points. But I know this is 813.2. And I know I have to hit existing ground here at 807.56. We're at 5.4% if we just hold that. So we'll go ahead and accept that. And so now we have this whole front of the building designed, right? But this is just our flow line. So now let's go ahead and create our corridor, which is going to build our surface for us. So we're going to go ahead and go to our corridor. And let's go ahead and call this our proposed grading. And we're going to do our baseline off of a feature line. Now, if you know what side it's on, you can do that. Usually I do the second green box, because when you grab the feature line, it automatically fills in the site. Our assembly, we're going to use our curb only to start off with. We don't have a target surface, so and then we could go ahead and set our baseline and regions, but I'm just going to run it through the whole thing. And there we have it. So obviously we need to do some work through here, tighten that up, tighten this up, so it's not as jagged. So once I have this first corridor, first section of the corridor built, I do pretty much everything up here in the ribbon. So I'm going to go ahead and select this corridor, click edit frequency, and here along tangents I'm going to go ahead and do 5 feet, and along curves I'm going to do 1 foot, and we see that that really cleaned it up. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our surface, right? So from the ribbon up here, I can go ahead and do a corridor surface. First thing we want to do is tell it to create a corridor surface. We'll go ahead and leave the name alone for now. I'm going to use my 1 in 5 contours. And then I'm just going to go ahead and tell it to use my links from my top. So I'm going to go ahead and hit plus, apply, hit OK. And so now we have this surface. So if we do our object viewer, right, we'll see that we have our surface. And we can also just do the eyeball check. So there, that contour is going from flow line to top of curb to back of curb and tying in over there. So now what happens is along here, we're going to want to have a sidewalk, right? Probably up to this point. So again, what I'm going to do with the corridor selected, we'll go ahead and split this region. And usually you don't want to go to a corner because it almost never goes to the right spot. So I'm going to go a little bit away from the corner to there, and then we're also going to split this region, and let's go ahead and do it to here. So now we'll go ahead and the corridor has rebuilt itself, but now we want to add our sidewalk along here. So I'm going to go up here to modify region. I'm going to go to my region properties, select the region I want to change, and we're just going to change the assembly right here. And boom. And now when we go ahead and look at our surface, we will see that it is all through here. All right, so now that we have that side, let's go ahead and clean up this side here. So I'm going to go ahead and select the corridor. We're going to split this region again, select it, go a little bit past that corner, and we're going to go to this corner, go a little bit before it, and again, modify region, region properties, and we're going to do our curb with sidewalk. And just to make sure, let's go ahead and rebuild that surface. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do this other side here. And so it's the same thing, but this time, if we want our curb to be on the left side, we're going to want to start our stationing at this corner. So we're going to go to our home tab, feature line, create feature line from objects. And same thing, let's name this guy. And now let's go ahead and select the feature. And again, we're going to grab our surface elevation here for our existing ground, and same thing on this end. And let's go ahead and check the stationing. So as we see, this one's starting on the wrong side, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit the reverse button here. And now we see our 0 stationed on that side where we want it. So now what I'm going to do, let's go ahead and throw a quick design in here. I'm going to go from this to my low point. And let's do a grade of -1%. And then let's go ahead and see if we go from here, straight shot to there, we're at 4%. So let's go ahead and accept that. Now here's another little tool that I like to use. Let me go ahead and set my nanoscale a little bit lower. And I would actually have to turn on another tool. So typically I like to label these guys. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to my annotate, do line and curve. And I have a grade check here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the feature line. And so why this is important is, I'll show you in a second. Let's go ahead and change the style on this guy, because there is also a grade check there. So you can see that there is a slope arrow on this style that I have. And so the reason I have that is I'm going to go ahead and change this section here. If I was to actually go down at 1% here, you see as I made that change to -1% going in this direction, that arrow's flipped for me. So if I go back to the 4.24, see how the arrows on my style are always facing downstream. I'll do another video on how to set that up. But the reason I do that is if I make this nanoscale a little bit bigger, is I have visual cues on where my drainage is actually going without having to come into the feature line tool and hit the quick select guy and figure it out this way. So I have a visual representation using my line label. So one thing we can do is I am going to go ahead and 4% on this parking. Maybe is a little steep, but we'll go ahead and leave it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and I am going to add that feature line to this corridor. So we're going to click the add baseline up here. We're going to do a feature line. So again, this is just, instead of going in to the corridor properties and doing all those extra steps, I'm doing it all from this one screen. And so now I can add a region now that this has been added and we see the red highlight. And we're going to go ahead and start at station 0. And let's actually just go to this return here. We're going to do our curb only. Tells me that there's no target. And there we go. So as we see, it's grading out as I'm going along. So now any changes I make to that feature line, so let's say, maybe it's, maybe we want to steepen this guy up. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's go from here to our low point. Let's say we want to go down at 5%. We see that my contours are changing. And then now we want to see what the slope is on this other side. So going from the new low elevation, I can just go to our existing ground. Now we're going up at 2%. And as I make that change, that is changing. So now to do these islands, it's really as simple as I can go ahead and take these islands, and we're going to go create feature lines from those. So same concept. But this time we are going to assign elevations. And we're going to go from our proposed ground surface. We do not want to add intermediate grade points. So that's going to add a grade break every single time that the triangle crosses it. We definitely don't want that. And let's go ahead and make it relative to the surface of 0. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So now let's find out which direction this is going. Again, pulling this guy up. Our 0 is right here in this corner, and we are going in this direction, which means our curve will be on the left side. So that's good. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new corridor off of this guy. And then this is going to be our island 1. It's going to be off of a feature line. Go ahead and grab our feature line, and we're going to do a curve only assembly. Let's go ahead and do the whole thing. Let's go ahead and edit our targets, our frequencies. We're going to do 1. And our curves. There we go. So now what we can do is from this corridor, we can create a corridor surface. And we're going to do our top. And we honestly don't even need to see this one. So I'm going to put it on no display. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create our composite surface. And what this composite surface is going to be, it's going to be a collection of these corridors so that they don't mess each other up. Or another thing I can do is I can go ahead and extract the feature lines from this corridor. And let's go ahead and do back, flow line, top. We don't really need a flange. So if I go ahead and set this to be dynamically linked to the corridor, that's fine. We don't need to name them. And so I can go ahead and extract those feature lines. And now I can go ahead and add those to this surface, and they won't mess up when I make changes. So I'm going to go ahead and add these as Island 1 feature lines. Go ahead and hit OK. So now we're able to have these contours also be updated as we make changes to the surface. Well, I hope that this was educational. Again, this is just a way that I've seen to do it. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to reach out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like the channel. Until next time, have a good one, guys.